So, after I completed my 35 long single take video on the Alliance Tournament 15's Bracketology, where I thought every team would end up in the tournament, where they would place, and why they would place there as opposed to other teams, I realized that I had actually recorded the wrong screen in OBS. So what that means is that you will just see a default screen that shows the bracket. I will actually give a link to the bracket in my video so that you can follow along with the video as it's playing. Unfortunately, I am far too lazy to do another 35-minute retake, so my apologies for that, and I hope that the actual Alliance tournament, at least the segments I am on, go far more smoothly than the recording of this video did. Thank you for following. Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Bracketology for Alliance Tournament 15. I'm going to be your host moderator, and today I'm going to be going over just exclusively the top 16 teams in the field of 64, or at least where I think teams will fall on that spectrum. So with there being so many teams in the tournament, it would take far too long for me to cover each individual team, so I'll be sticking to the teams that I think will be making top 16 in the event. So, how the seeding breaks down in this event is that teams 1 through 16 from Alliance Tournament 14, last year's tournament, get seeding back from their results in that event and are seeded in the bracket accordingly. The other 49 slots were awarded via the open draw that teams bid into the process for, or were from the play-in rounds where teams had to compete to earn a slot this year in the tournament, with there being nearly about 100 applicants in total coming into this event. So one of the things that this has really done is it's made the tournament a lot more competitive. There's a lot more quality teams that are actually in this event, and that's created a lot more parity and a lot more competitive matches, especially going into the second weekend and further in the event. Unfortunately for me, that makes my job a bit more difficult trying to pick these matches, but I was able to go up about 70-80 billion-isk last year in Alliance Tournament 14, so I'm doing a pretty good job of it so far. So starting off in my 16th pick is going to be Purple Helmeted Warriors. Now, it's important to note that 16 through 13 are all effectively the same spot. Same with 9 through 12, 7 and 8, 6 and 5, all the way up until we get to the top 4. So this is in no particular order. This is just people that lose going past losers round 5. So I've got Purple Helmeted Warriors, like I was saying. Unfortunately for them, they have to go through a rather deep run in the lower bracket, and that is because they are going up against, if I scroll up further here, they have Volta in their first round draft, and that's really unfortunate for them. Volta, it was a team that came in 3rd last year. They have been performing consistently well throughout the tournament season, and unfortunately Purple Helmeted Warriors just doesn't really have a chance of knocking down Volta in an opening match like that. However, I do have Purple Helmeted Warriors going as far as they are, simply because they had a very impressive performance in the feeder rounds, going 3-1 in that bracket. And I think they showed enough depth of setups and piloting and mechanical skill that they earn that spot for me. Now, in order to get there, they have to go against Quebec United Legions, a team that really didn't do much in the actual feeder rounds themselves. And then they have to go up against Test. Test is a team that unfortunately has to themselves go up against Skill Yourself, and means that I think that one of these two teams will be going into an unfortunate lower bracket run, but Purple Helmeted Warriors just look good enough in the feeder rounds that I'm picking them to go top 16. My next top 16 team is going to be Hard Knock Citizens. So Hard Knock Citizens goes into the lower bracket fairly late compared to some of the other teams here. And their run, if we have to have them go up, is going to be against FCON. Hard Knocks has been practicing a good amount on the actual Tranquility and, or rather, Thunderdome server, they've been looking good throughout, but they don't look quite solid enough to go up against Volta again. So I have them going up against Band Apart, which could be a difficult match for them. Band Apart themselves coming in top 16 in the previous Alliance tournament. Hard Knocks is a team that has pretty good macro decisions. Wormholers have to often multi-box a lot, but where they've tended to falter is some of the individual mechanical decisions, and that's why I have them going to about top 16, but not much further than that. So the next team after them is going to be Brave Collective. Now, Brave Collective, it was a very difficult pick for me to have them go into the losers bracket, even to have them go that far, and that's because the first round they go up against Goonswarm Federation. Now, I honestly think that their first round pick here could be a complete coin flip, and Spectre Fleet also is been looking really good in the feeder round, so I think any one of these teams really could do it, and that just goes back to what I was saying earlier about the parity and the competitiveness for these teams. Picking some of these top 16 teams is a lot more difficult than picking some of the top 12, some of the top 8 teams, just because there are so many teams that are fighting for these kind of mid-level, mid-tier slots going for the seeding into Alliance Tournament 16. Brave Collective looked good in their feeder rounds. They showed that they've got a good amount of mechanical skill and depth, and they brought comps that made a lot of sense. They clearly have a decent understanding of this year's meta, so unfortunately, whoever from this series, either Goonswarm or Spectre Fleet, they're going against the champions of Alliance Tournament 14, Tusker's company, and I just don't see any of them really having a chance to beat Tuskers, and any of those teams would get knocked down to the lower bracket here, and again, they are just being put in a situation where they'd be facing Vidra Loaded, Vidra being the practice partner and one of my top teams this year. I just don't see Vidra being a team that any of these teams can really beat, and there's a reason that Hydra's picked them as a practice partner. They had a good performance last year, and I expect good things out of them this year. So my next team is actually going to be Pisces Syndicate. Pisces Syndicate was a team that actually made top 8 last year, but unfortunately many of their members are not actually going to be returning this year, and some of their leadership has gone to join Hydra Loaded. Ironically, Pisces Syndicate will be facing Hydra Loaded almost certainly in the second round. And Hydra Loaded is a team I favor to make the grand finals, if not outright win the event this year. So Pisces Syndicate just really has an unfortunate draw going that early. And Pisces Syndicate is a team that I can definitely see beating a Goonswarm Federation or a Spectre Fleet or End of Life, and as well as Fraternity here. Pasty showed a really commanding set of micro skills as well as a good understanding of last year's meta, and I think they should do the same going forward this year. So that wraps up the bottom 12, or bottom 16 rather, for me this year. So moving forward into the top 12, we've got the Ronin. The Ronin, unfortunately, I have losing their very first match to Skill Yourself, but then absolutely tearing through the lower bracket. Ronin is a team that has never been quite a contender for the podium, but they've always been just in that second rung of teams right below them. They've had a lot of piloting skill, they've had a lot of mechanical understanding of theory, and they've always been good, but never great, never quite a team that can push to the next level. And they got 9th place last year, only losing to Tuskers in the end. So a team that has been very competitive throughout, and even being a team that knocked out Hydra in Alliance Tournament 12. So Ronin is going to be losing, in my predictions, to Skill Yourself. Skill Yourself is a team that I've been hearing a lot of very good things from other team captains, and are my dark horse to make it very deep into the tournament this year. Having said that, whoever wins this matchup is going to make a tear through the winner's bracket, and whoever loses that is going to be possibly a top 8, top 12, top 16 team going into the lower bracket. I really think that Ronan Skill Yourself is the best match of the entire first round in Alliance Tournament 15, and I'm really eager to watch and hopefully cast that match this weekend on EvenT's main stream. So going on into my next team, we've got Vidra Reloaded. So Vidra is in a position where they would have to get knocked out by, again, Skill Yourself. Again, I think either team that gets knocked down into the lower bracket more or less has a similar run through that series. Vidra, I think, can really tear through almost any team here, but unfortunately, I think that either Volta will knock out either Skill Yourself or Vidra, whoever gets knocked down here, and I just can't justify Vidra going any further into the tournament, having to go up against a team that was top 3 last year. Nothing against Vidra or Skill Yourself, it's just that Volta is a team that was very dominant last year, and is going to be one of the teams that is competing for Alliance Tournament prize ships and the podium this year. So, down in my lower half of the lower bracket, we have Thermodynamics. Thermodynamics is a team that also has another unfortunate early round pick that they end up going against, I believe, Exodus in round 2. Let me scroll up to confirm that. So yes, Exodus and Thermodynamics is my likely pick. Thermodynamics goes up against Requiem Eternal, almost certainly wins that match. An interesting grudge match. Thermodynamics has been roaming through Requiem Eternal space a lot on Tranquility. They've been fighting, so it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. Thermodynamics is a team I expect to make top 12, top 16, simply because they're a team that I know has a good amount of mechanical skill just from playing with them on Tranquility, and they are also the team that ended up winning the Imperium's Anger Games, the second version of the tournament that was hosted there. So they definitely understand and have what it takes to make deep runs in events. Having said that, though, the Anger Games didn't quite have the depth of competition that is going to be in the Alliance Tournament. So I just don't see Thermodynamics making it past a team like Skill Yourself, though I do give them a bit of an edge over Hard Knock Citizens or 404 Alliance Not Found, and even Rote Capel. Having said that, Thermodynamics is a team that has to go up against a lot of really strong teams in the lower bracket, and it was a very difficult pick for me to have them make it go as far as they are. 404 is a team that made top 12 last year, but didn't really have any impressive wins in their resume. It just felt like they were grinding out teams that they were marginally better than until they got knocked out. Rote Capel, a team that made it through the feeder rounds going 3-1, but Rote not having any super strong performances there. I just think that Thermodynamics is marginally better than most of these teams, but I can definitely see an upset going against them. So the last team I have in my lower bracket is Tempest Calcif. You'll notice that Tempest Calcif I have going through all the way of the losers bracket, and that's for the simple reason that they are the singularly most unlucky team in the Alliance Tournament, and they get drawn up against Hydra Reloaded in the first match, and that's a really unfortunate pick for them. So Tempest Calcif was a team that actually got second place in the Anger Games. They were practicing with and against Thermodynamics, actually, for that event, and they were improving each other and both giving each other's teams with practice and experience, training for the Alliance Tournament to get to a point where they were able to place deeply into the Anger Games. And I also believe that this is a team that has a good amount of potential, a good amount of understanding of theory crafting and meta, that I just don't see them really getting knocked out by anyone other than actually maybe a Spectre Fleet. Spectre Fleet is a team that I can also see going very far into this tournament, and I might actually have to revise my bracket later. I don't know if I would pick Templess Calcif to actually go up against and win against Purple Helmeted Warriors, but I think Templess Calcif could actually lose to Mercenary Coalition as well. There's a lot of teams in this lower bracket that could give them a really difficult run, and this was made prior to me getting some more information on other teams, but at the time that I made this bracket, Templess was a team that I thought could make top 12, and I still think they can do it, but it might be more difficult now for them to knock out a Purple Helmeted Warriors, to knock out a Spectre Fleet, to knock out a Mercenary. Regardless, these should all be very close matches, and again, with there being a lot more parity and a lot more competition this year, that means that there's really no bad matches this late into the losers bracket. All of these should be pretty exciting. So that more or less concludes my top 12, and from here on out we move into the top 8. So Phoebe Freeport Republic is a team that I have losing in the lower bracket to or going sent to the lower bracket because they get eventually drawn up against Pandemic Legion. Phoebe Freeport probably has their most difficult match actually in the first round, going up against Ghost Legion. Ghost Legion, a team that had a good showing into the first round of the feeder round, where they were automatically placed into the Alliance Tournament. However, Phoebe Freeport had a very deep run into Alliance Tournament 14, grinding out a series of, I want to say, 8 wins in the lower bracket, eventually placing themselves in top 8. And they shouldn't have any trouble with A Pen Is Out. They shouldn't have too much trouble with of the lower chords. Ghost Legion is probably their most difficult adversary, and I see either Ghost Legion or Phoebe Freeport eventually losing to Pandemic Legion. Pandemic Legion, though, we'll get to them later and explain why I don't think they're quite the dominant team this year that they've been in the past. I just don't see any of these teams really being able to take it to Pandemic Legion, even in a best of 1. So that puts PFR against the Ronin. This could be a coin toss. I see either team doing rather well in this matchup, but I don't see either team actually beating Volta. Again, it's a case where these are teams that are just outside of the edge of the podium, competing against teams that have been traditionally much more dominant than them, that have shown more in terms of mechanics, theory crafting, and just piloting and captaining decisions as a whole. So, this is kind of a controversial pick. A lot of people, I'm sure, will disagree with me on this, but Exodus and Skill Yourself I see going either way. But the reason I have Exodus actually losing to Skill Yourself is just that from speaking to other team captains who have played against both teams respectively, I hear a lot more good things about Skill Yourself than I hear Exodus. Having said that, Exodus is no slouch themselves. Exodus is a team that in previous tournaments has always been in the top running for the podium. In Alliance Tournament 13, they placed second after the disqualification of both Hydra Reloaded and Camel Empire, so they had finished originally top 4. Last year, they finished in the top 5, and I think that they're a team that can definitely contend for a spot just outside the podium this year. The only reason that I'm not putting Exodus higher is because they made some kind of wonky decisions with some of their compositions and how they chose to field their flagship, as well as the fact that I feel that there are teams that have a deeper 10-man roster than them going into the field of competition. So, Skill Yourself, or Exodus rather, their route into the tournament is to go through against We Want Your ISK. They shouldn't have too much trouble with that. Thermodynamics, again, a match I already covered. Exodus shouldn't have too much trouble there. I also see Exodus beating Fraternity, even though Fraternity was a top 12 team last year. Fraternity didn't do anything particularly impressive to make it there. They knocked out a number of relatively, I'd say, weaker alliances, as well as Test Alliance Please Ignore, in their run, and Exodus is a team I just see as having more depth. Northern Coalition I have beating Exodus in the best out of 1 here, simply because I saw more out of Northern Coalition last year, and this could be a coin toss. I see this as being more of a 50-50 match, but due to NC's performance last year, I'm giving them the edge in this matchup, and then going up into the winners bracket semi-final against Tuskers Co. So Exodus could very well knock out Skill Yourself, and in a best of 1, I actually see Exodus or Skill Yourself possibly beating, if not probably beating, Pandemic Legion. I'll get to why I think that in just a few here. So Exodus more or less wraps up their run at about a top 8 to about a top 4 team. I don't really see them breaking onto the podium this year for them, unfortunately. So that brings us more or less to NC Dot. NC Dot, again, they have a pretty easy run for a team of their caliber all the way up until Exodus. They shouldn't have any trouble with a Razor. We still haven't quite found where Razor is. Shadow Cartel. Shadow Cartel used to be a very competitive team in the past, but most of the players who were involved in that tournament team are no longer with Shadow Cartel or don't play anymore, and that's why Shadow Cartel has dropped off significantly in the past. Dream Fleet was a team that made top 16 last year, but Northern Coalition was a team that was again very dominant in Alliance Tournament 14 rather, and made top 4. They should win that match. Northern Coalition, Exodus, again, like I was saying earlier, it's a 50-50 coin toss for me. It's just that when Northern Coalition goes up against Tuskers Co., I don't see either Northern Coalition or Tuskers beating Tuskers in the best out of 3. Possibly in the best out of 1 if they were to hard counter them somehow, or somehow all in them. But in the best out of 3, Tuskers is just the better team in that series. So that puts Northern Coalition down, having lost that match, to go up against We Form Volta. Now, the reason I have Volta beating Northern Coalition here is that Volta is a team that actually beat Northern Coalition last year 2-0 in a best out of 3. And when that happened, Volta, it felt like they read Northern Coalition like a book. They picked up against some of the tendencies of NC Dot that were more predictable, and they were able to exploit some of these weaknesses and predictabilities. And I just believe that Volta is a team that has more mechanics, or more mechanical depth, better pilots, better theory crafting than Northern Coalition. Northern Coalition really should have won that exciting best out of 1 that we had last year in Alliance Tournament 14 against Pandemic Legion. If Northern Coalition can't beat a Pandemic Legion in a best out of 1 when Pandemic Legion suicides to Sleipnirs to the boundary, I just don't see them beating a team like Volta that's kind of on a similar caliber as Pandemic Legion this year. So Volta, I have then beating Skill Yourself. Eventually, Skill Yourself is just going to run into an opponent that's more difficult than them. I also see Volta beating Pandemic Legion this year. More on that a little bit later. So that actually brings us right now to Pandemic Legion's run, as I have them getting knocked out in the lower bracket to a Volta or a Skill Yourself. So Pandemic Legion actually has a relatively easy run of things. They go up against Intrepid Crossing. Intrepid Crossing has never really done anything of note in the Alliance tournament. The Clown Car is a roaming kind of a wormhole entity that uses the connections from a C2 to roam and do some small game things. I know there's been some problems in Clown Car creating a tournament team that can actually compete against Pandemic Legion. They shouldn't have too many troubles there. This is an interesting grudge match between Pandemic Legion and Mercenary Coalition. Mercenary Coalition has some of the members of Body Count Inc., which was a former corp in Pandemic Legion, but Pandemic Legion has retained most of the talent that they've had, or at least enough of it in order to actually knock out MC. And again, Pandemic Legion shouldn't have too much trouble with an alliance like PFR, but PFR is an alliance that I see possibly upsetting them. The reason being for that is that Pandemic Legion has actually lost their team captain. Their former team captain is no longer involved with their tournament team, at least in that capacity, and they have a new captain and a new co-captain, and they've also lost some of the Hydra members that were competing with them in the past, and a good number of players on their team apparently are frustrated with the game, and they are no longer willing to compete and practice in the tournament, which is unfortunate for them. Pandemic Legion's always been a team that can really contend for a tournament title. They've been one of the most, if not the most, winning alliance in the Alliance tournament. They came second last year, so they're never a team that you can count out easily. Having said that, though, I don't see them beating Hydra Reloaded in a best out of 3 series. Hydra Reloaded and Camel Empire in modern times have combined to form a super team in Hydra Reloaded, and Hydra and Camel were both teams that respectively in the last few years never actually lost a best out of 3 or a best out of 5 to a team that wasn't one of those two entities. So I don't see them dropping a best out of 3 to Pandemic Legion, especially not when Pandemic Legion has lost a lot of their tournament veterans and their tournament co-captain. So that takes us to, again, a Tuskers Co. Volta matchup. So Volta I have going all the way through the lower bracket here. Tuskers Co. I have going up against Northern Coalition, winning that matchup, and then losing in a best out of 3 to Hydra Reloaded. So Hydra Reloaded is a team that, when they competed in best out of 3s as Warlords of the Deep or as Camel Empire over the last couple years, from Alliance Tournament 12 to Alliance Tournament 15, both teams having chosen to not actually enter Alliance Tournament 14, they always looked dominant, and they looked like they were the clear favorites to win to anyone who was really more in the know of the kind of the tournament hierarchy. And this is difficult for me to say, especially as I am a member of the Tuskers Co., but also formerly being a member of Camel. Tuskers dropped every single dropped the match in every single best out of 3. They dropped their best out of 3 winner series to Pandemic Legion, going down 2-1 or 2-0, I believe. And then, unfortunately for Tuskers, there's a little bit of an asterisk for them, whether or not they want to admit it, having been the beneficiaries of an unfortunate problem with server routing from North America to CCP servers in London, England, unfortunately disconnecting some of the Pandemic Legion, and in fairness, a couple Tuskers pilots, giving them a bit of an edge, and then really tilting Pandemic Legion. That's also one of the reasons I don't have Pandemic Legion as one of the favorites this year, is that they're a team that gets very emotionally invested, and if they get tilted, I don't see themselves bringing them back into the tournament and refocusing on the next match going forward. Hydra typically hasn't had those kind of problems. Tuskers also brought some compositions in Alliance Tournament 14 that they really knew shouldn't have worked against the bands that Pandemic Legion were bringing. So Tuskers, while they did win Alliance Tournament 14 last year, they were probably the least convincing team in recent memory to actually win the Alliance Tournament, and that's part of the reason I'm giving Hydra the pick to win against that winners final. And then Tuskers I have dropping down into the lower bracket losers final and winning a 2-1 against Volta. For all the things that I've said negative in this match against Volta, I don't see Volta actually dropping. I see Volta being competitive against Tuskers, but I just see Tuskers as having better theory crafting, better pilots, and I know that Volta also has some of the issues that Pandemic Legion have, where they get really emotionally invested into the results, and that they can tilt if they drop a match. Volta also had some questionable theory, or not theory crafting, but questionable decision making in Alliance Tournament 14, choosing to not kill the flagship of the Tuskers Co. Had they done that, Tuskers would have not ended up winning the Alliance Tournament. The Balgorn flagship that survived being a key part of Tuskers' victory. So all of these lower bracket matches I have as being fairly close, fairly contentious, but I just give the edge to Tuskers Company in this best of 3 run. And then Hydra Reloaded already being up 1 match in the best out of 5 against Tuskers. I think Tuskers will take a match or 2, but I don't see Hydra Reloaded having being 1 match up, dropping more than 1 or 2 matches tops to Tuskers. And I think that Hydra really are the team to beat this year in the Alliance Tournament. So one of the questions for Hydra Reloaded this year is, how good of practice do they have? They don't have the practice partners in Camel Empire. They've been practicing with Hydra Reloaded, who are a strong team to be certain, but they're not as strong as a Camel or as some of the teams that they've practiced with in the past. So that is one of the knocks against them. So it'll be very interesting to see, can they bring it back? Can they be a solid team after having taken a year off in the previous tournament? How will they perform without Kadesh Priestess, their former captain and theory crafter, having now been banned in the Alliance Tournament? Do they still have the leadership and the team structure to do it? Unfortunately for them, losing all of that and the results of their collusion are a bit of a knock against them going into the tournament as a whole. But I think that they are stronger so marginally than many of the other teams in this field. That's why I give them the victory. And I'm really excited to see how this plays out. I'm also really excited to see if I'm wrong in any of these picks. There are so many teams again with a lot of parity and a lot of depth that I can see anyone really going a round or 2 further than I think they might. I may have really overestimated Skill Yourself. Exodus is a team, or Pandemic Legion, that might be stronger than I might have given them credit for. But in the end, I think that we're going to see these be more or less general trends. So in the end, where does that put us? Hydra Reloaded coming first, securing 25 of each Alliance Tournament cruiser and frigate. Tuskers Company coming second place, securing 15 of each Alliance Tournament cruiser and frigate. Volta coming in a solid third once again, securing 7 prize ships, and some combination of either Skill Yourself, Exodus or Pandemic Legion, or even a Northern Coalition. Northern Coalition has an unfortunate run in that I don't think they can beat Volta, so I think we're going to see one of the top 4 teams come from either a PL, a Skill Yourself, or an Exodus coming in 4th place. And it's really excited to see a 4th place be wide open. There's definitely storylines to be made, and teams really competing for those final slots, and I'm eager to see how this pans out. Those are my predictions for Alliance Tournament 14. If there's anything that you disagree with or agree with, post it in the comments in this video or on Reddit. And with that, I hope to see you guys this weekend and the remaining weekends of the Alliance Tournament 14. Catch you on the stream.